So after the Duncan bump from the last podcast, episode 87, we're double eights, double hatchet today, episode 88. Now, from all those downloads and stuff that I got with having Duncan back on, the first time since, by himself, the first time since July, got that massive bump, so you give the people what you want. So today, I'm here on my own. Yeah, Duncan's busy again. So I've got a news story that I've been wanting to talk about for such a long time. Is finally gaining momentum here in Japan, and it's over a couple of countries. So the crimes have been happening here in Japan, and they've become violent. Now, just to give you a bit of context, I'm from the north of England. Crime isn't rife. It's not America or Moscow or anything like that, but it's not safe. I've got a couple of kids, and they're in and out on trains. They're going about the business by themselves on the bikes, and they're walking about with their friends of similar ages. And I do not have a care in the world about them because no, what's going to happen to them here. There are kids in the middle of Tokyo every morning. 6, 7-year-old kids will get up, they'll walk to the station. Maybe the parents will escort them to the station, but they'll get on a train, a couple of trains. They'll go across Tokyo to go to school. Nothing happens to them. That's how safe it is here. So any sort of crime that does happen is put on the news. Every time it's put on the news. Crimes that wouldn't even get newspaper space are put on the news here. Somebody gets done for drink driving. Somebody gets done for sending a risque text to some child that's underage. And you'll see the fella getting led out by the police. Now, that, where I'm from, wouldn't even get on the news. It wouldn't even get on the news, but it does here. It does here. So when something does happen that is considered violent, it's top news. It is the top of the bill for quite a while. And it knocks off the big stories, like Ukraine, earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. It knocks that off the top. So the story that's going around at the moment, which has been probably the lead story for about a month here now, is the home invasion. Now, there are some crime bosses in the Philippines that have been collared, and they're in a detention centre now. Or they were in a detention centre in the Philippines, just outside Manila. Now, this ringleader, and they think the ringleader is, because they've got no idea, they think the ringleader is a fellow that goes under the name of Luffy. Now, all of you that are into Japanese anime will know who Luffy is a character from One Piece. So this crime boss has taken the handle of Luffy. Very cute. And that's where the cuteness ends in this story, because the stuff that he's been getting up to, hellfire. Now everybody thinks this Luffy fella, is a bloke that goes under the name of Yuki Watanabe. Now there's 4 of these ringleaders. Kyoto Inamura, Toshiya Fujita, and Tomonobu Kojima. And the fella who they think is Luffy, who is Yuki Watanabe. Now, what's been going on is there have been a lot of scams that started in 2019. And 80% of the population that gets scammed here are old people. Because it's so easy to scam an old person here in Japan. Never tried it. I don't have the Japanese for it. But because it's such an honest society, they do seem to get scammed a lot. And just to give you an example, you might have to go into exchangerate.com. In fact, I'll do it now. So while I do it, I'll just explain. In 2015, the first half of 2015, let me just find XE now. The first half of 2015, these scams cost people in Japan 23.65 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 23.65 billion yen. Now, just a second. 26, 23, 65, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So, old people in Japan in the first half of 2015 were scammed out of, in dollars, $147 million. No, sorry, $174 million. That's what these people were able to scam them out of. For my British listeners, that would be 144 million, nearly 144.5 million pound, and in euros, 163.5 million euros. Now, the way of doing this, the way that they were getting away with it is, you do a bit of a background check on these old people, widows especially widows of fellas that have died who were bosses of these big multinational companies. So you get on the blower, grandma, I'm in jail and I need this money to get out of jail. Can you send me 3 million yen? 3 million yen, 6, 12, 18,000 pound. Call it $28,000. So they would send it to a bank account or send it to their phone. So the grandma or grandfather thinks they're bailing the kid out of the police station, and then poof, they're in the wind. They're in the wind. The money's gone, and it's a scam. And they'll get in touch with the police, and the police weren't able to do much. So this is 2015 that they were scamming that much money, and that has gradually gone up and up and up. So what's happened now is, on the encrypted app Telegram, these fellas in the Philippines have been advertising what they would call dark part-time jobs. And the way that they'd get these kids is they'd advertise on the dark web. Obviously, you've got a lot of kids, early 20s, late teenagers, early 20s. They don't know how to get on in their life. They're seeing all this stuff online and they want to make easy money. They don't want to be going into work for 15, 16 hours a day. They don't want any of that now. Japanese society is moving away from it. I think these kids have seen what the dads were getting up to for 40 odd years and they don't want that. So they're looking for some easy money. And they found a way answering to these dark part-time jobs. So what these fellas in the Philippines would do, say, right, you want one of these jobs, but first of all, you need to show me your ID, driving license with your address, and give me your social security number. So these kids thinking, right, I can put in 3 or 4 hours work a week and I can earn a month's pay. So they'd show their IDs, they'd show the driving licenses, so they had all the information. They had all the information on this. So then the fellas in the Philippines would go away and then contact them with addresses and names of people who were good targets to hit to get this money. They were thinking, yeah, this woman or this man must have so much money in that house that if I can get some of these kids just to go in there and steal it all, and then they would take a percentage of the haul. Now, the first thing I thought was, well, why would somebody who's taking all the risk send the majority of the money back to the Philippines to these fellas? And it was only I think it was only last week that I found out that they had all their information online. And I think a few of these kids decided to keep everything that they'd got and send nothing. So then what this Luffy gang did, or Luffy and his gang did, was they would get back in touch with these kids and then say, look, motherfucker, I've got your ID. I've got your address. I know where your parents live. I'll kill them all. And then I'll send whatever crime that you've done, I'll send it to the police, and you're not going to be seeing daylight for at least between 5 and 7 years. So they've got them on the hook. They've got them on hook. Now, I'm not sure how much they were sending them back to the Philippines, but these fellas were living the life of luxury. I know a couple of them were seeing Filipino women, and obviously being full of themselves, they were kicking the shit out of their girlfriends and the wives, and a couple of them got arrested for this. So they were already put inside in 2020. I think they were put away. But because they had money, because they had Japanese yen from all these scams, they were able to go in one of these Hollywood style prisons. If you've got the money, you're not really doing real time. So they were in their own private part of the prison, which was like living in an apartment. They had access to TV, internet, telephones were allowed in, they were allowed visits, they could get hookers in, their own food, they had kitchens, and this cost them 100,000 yen a month to live in this posh part of the jail. So 100,000 is 600 quid a month. And they weren't living with the general population. And for them that have read any kind of book or any article about these drug dealers or drug traffickers that get caught in the Philippines, if you can afford that, you'd pay it. Because the Filipino jails, I would like to spend a week in them, never mind all else. So it turns out that they're still in, they've been in jail since 2020 doing time for beating up these Filipino women. And they were still sending hits out on these home invasions while they were in prison. Excuse me. So yeah, they were doing this from prison. Now, there have been 50 of these incidents since 2019 over 14 prefectures and a total of 20 successful robberies. So what they were doing with these kids were they would get Japanese policeman uniforms made up in the Philippines, cheap, send them out. They'd also get them fake IDs and sometimes fake council worker IDs. So they could go in, pretend that the City Hall and do an interview with them to get them, say they were doing a poll for an election. One person would sit down with a pension and the other would be off up in bedrooms just filling his boots. Yeah, with the police, it'd be like I say, it'd be a two-man gig. One would go in to the living room to interview him, the other would just pull everything out upstairs, having a look around. And they were getting millions, possibly billions of yen doing just this one gang. Now, it all come to a head in January of this year. In January of this year, Kinuyo Oshio in Tokyo, Komai City, I think. I lived in Tokyo for 3 years. I don't think I've ever heard of this city. But she let these policemen in, and she was 90-year-old, and it all got a bit out of hand, and they killed her. Now, I'm not sure on the details. I'm not sure if they knifed her, but she certainly got beaten up. And I think certainly one person has been arrested. But this woman had millions of yen in her house, and also she had gold bars. So all this was stolen. All this was taken and shipped off. The kid took his cut, but the police have got hold of his telephone, and this is how they've found out that all these instructions on who to hit, how much to expect to get, was coming in from the Philippines, behind bars. So what the Filipino authorities have done now is they've washed their hands of it, and they've sent all 4 of them are back in Japan now. All 4 of them have been deported. Now, I was watching on telly the other day. They must have tipped off the TV companies because a bloke got picked up in Chiba. 52-year-old, same age as me. And he's fucking about robbing pensioners. And he was picked up. There were a load of them, and if this was done in America, you'd have your face on the floor and you'd be handcuffed up. But they showed you him getting arrested live on Japanese TV, and it seemed to me all very pleasant. And when he realised the cameras were on him, a mask came out of nowhere. So he put his mask on. He were complaining a bit about the TV cameras, but yeah, off he were away, carted away. Now, to recruit these young kids, I think hasn't taken much. And I think obviously the Japanese are very upset with all these home invasions, but now that this 90-year-old woman has been murdered in her house by this gang, the Japanese public are demanding, they want results, because they think that Japanese society is going downhill now, and they're going to slide into crime rates that they're not going to be able to deal with. I mean, they don't want it to become like America. I mean, nobody wants anything to become like America. But this, I think, especially the older generation, they're seeing this as the beginning of the end. So I don't know what's going to happen with these kids or this gang in the future, but I'll keep you updated with it. And if you ever come here and visit Japan, there's nothing to worry about. It is a few cases like this that happens where people go, Jesus Christ, and then it'll calm down again. You will only get maybe 1 or 2 crimes as serious as this every 2 or 3 years. But this story does seem to be in the news, and it's been in the news for quite a while. So I'll keep you updated on it in the future. Right, now, the second story I've got today, and I've been banging on about how safe it is in Japan, which it is, but the second story comes from Hiroshima. And there seems to be a spate of this happening in this one school. And I don't know what it is about this school, but a junior high school. So junior high school in Hiroshima. So junior high school is 12 to 15-year-olds. And it's the second one of the week. There's been a knife attack in this school. So what's happened is a around 8:15 on Friday, there was 2 kids in a toilet, and 12-year-old kid was doing what you do in a toilet, probably having a piss or washing his hands, and a 17-year-old kid came in with a kitchen knife and had a go at him, slashed him in the arm. Now, the authorities are thinking it's a copycat from what happened earlier in the week, and I can't find any story on the previous incident, but they're saying it's a copycat crime. Now, I think this 12-year-old kid was putting his arms up because his arms suffered minor injuries, and another kid ran out, got a teacher. The teacher got him to the floor, and the police came, took him away. The kid that got slashed, the 12-year-old kid, he's fine. No problem there. So the police took him away, and obviously interviewed him on Friday. I don't know if he's out. I don't know if he's got out, or I don't know what they do here with kids that do stuff like that. But when interviewed, he said, "I just wanted to see what would happen to me if I killed somebody." So he went into the school and he slashed up a kid. And that was his reason for doing it. Now, if that were me, I would have gone to a teacher, especially if you're in the 80s at school, because there were no internet then. You'd go to a teacher. "Excuse me, sir, if I bring a kitchen knife into school and knife a kid that's 5 years younger than me, what would happen to me?" And the teacher would probably say, "You'd probably go into the big house for a few years and then get out and not be able to get a decent job. So you wouldn't do it." Now, it's 2023. This 17-year-old kid could have gone online, just clicked on a few keys. What would happen if I went and knifed somebody at school and killed him? Yeah, you're going into prison. And it would have been a hefty prison sentence if he'd have killed somebody. Now, I don't know what he's looking at here because he's only 17-year-old. But to say that as your excuse, I wanted to know what would happen to me if I killed somebody. That's your reason for doing this? Now, in Japan, I don't think from this incident they're going to be putting security people on the door, checking people coming in and out. Because, let me just have a look here. I think it was in 2001, just before I got here. Yeah, in Osaka in 2001. A fella got into an elementary school in Ikeda, Osaka Prefecture, and he killed 8 and wounded 15. Yeah, stabbing and slashing. And he got 2 teachers in that attack. And I can remember getting here and I was looking for a job, and I ended up working at an elementary school for a school year. And that would have been in 2005. And all the schools here in Japan are all open plan. So what they were preparing for, and this were first grade elementary school kids, so 6-year-olds. So the alarm went off. The teachers had to push all the desks towards the gap to the classroom. The kids would go at the back of the classroom and the windows would be open. The teachers had to then put chairs in front of the tables where you'd blocked them off. So then if a fella came over with a knife or a sword, you would throw the chairs at him. So you'd have at least 30 chairs to throw at him. And if he's not given up after that, because you're in the elementary school and that they're always on ground floor, the kids would have to start jumping out at window. and go somewhere safe. And then in every classroom you had, I don't know if they've got these in America or in England, it were a pole and it had kind of like a horseshoe shape. Something that you'd see rescuing people from a swimming pool. So if the fellow were running towards you, if you got him at the end of this pole and just pushed him away, if the throwing the chairs hadn't stopped him and he's still coming at you, you would get this pole and bring it down and then push him away. Now, how you're going to do that in such a short space of time is beyond me. Is beyond me. But I think they just had all this stuff there just to placate the parents, because it was just this one incident in Osaka, and I was training for it in an elementary school that was just south of Tokyo. So I think the whole country must have been doing it. And it just came from this one fella that went in and killed, 8 kids? Now, this was a student on student crime. I don't think they're going to be putting metal detectors in Japanese schools. In fact, I know that for a fact. But the fact that it was the second incident that took place at the same school has been a surprise for me. Certainly a surprise for me. Okay, last story of the day before I sign off. So for those of you that can think back to 2019, Carlos Ghosh was here, turning around Nissan at the time. And I think he's only one or two foreigners that have ever been in charge of a Japanese company. And I should have checked, but I think Pentax had a foreigner, and he didn't last long. He got booted out. I think it something to do with corruption. Now the one two struck on Carlos, so the Trump took some charges against him, and they put him under house arrest. And they were doing him on a corruption charge, so he couldn't get out of the country. So what he did was, I mean, I love the fact he did this. What he did, where he came, I think he employed some musicians at his house to put a concert on for him. And they put this concert on for him, and then after the concert, they packed up all the stuff in crates. And old Carlos got in the crate, got onto a private plane, and off he went. And I think he ended up back in the Lebanon, or somewhere like that. And then all of a sudden, he pops up on Lebanese TV, and the Japanese government are going, "What? Where is he? Where is it?" And he'd gone. He'd left the country illegally. Obviously, the Lebanese stamped his passport and let him in. And since then, the Japanese government have thrown shit fits about it. And I can remember I came back into Japan in January 2020. That was the last time I left the country before the plague started. Now, usually with your residential card, with your Japanese residential card, you can just go straight to the front of queue in front of all these tourists that are coming in and just get stamped and be through. But because of Carlos, everybody, Japanese, tourists, residential cards, permanent residents, you're all lumped in the same queue. So you had to wait. And rather it taking 15 minutes to get through immigration, you were there with rest at shit munchers for a good hour and a half. Yeah. So that all changed. Obviously, it'll have gone back to normal now. But only last week, what the Japanese government are now doing is they're voting on whether to put GPS trackers on criminals now. So criminals under house arrest, they know exactly where you are all the time. And then what they were doing with Carlos is they were posting police outside his house just to make sure he wasn't leaving the house, or to make sure that we're back in his house on time, and they were following him. So I think what they're going to do now is you'll have the ankle bracelet on, and they're voting on that whether it what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, something to do with human rights. But I would have thought that they would have done that here years ago with the technology that they have. Obviously, I think in Japan you wouldn't have to have the ankle bracelet. I'm sure they can put a chip in you or something like that. But yeah, it's taken them 4 years to decide whether or not to vote on to give these criminals GPS trackers. And that was the last story of the day, which I found quite hilarious because they are still pissed off about that. Still pissed off about it. Right, so I'll be doing more of these podcasts when my co-hosts or my guests can't join us. They can't join us, so I'll be doing this in the future. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I can still get a bounce from what I got last time. So fingers crossed. Share it and enjoy it. And I'll see you next week. Hopefully, for no knifing stories or crime stories. But where's the fun in that? See you soon.